Hi, everyone. I'm Thérèse, and this is New York Girl Again, The After, the podcast for caregivers who have survived the hardest chapter of their lives and are now gathering both the courage and the strength to write the next one. I'm so grateful to hold this space with you in the after. Last week, we talked about body burnout, the physical toll caregiving takes on our bodies. I shared how so many of us wake up in the after feeling like we're living in a stranger's body, one we barely recognize or trust. I also promised I would take a deeper dive into my own journey, specifically the nearly 50 pounds I gained while serving as my father's sole caregiver. But here's the part I didn't tell you last week. I carried that weight for almost 2 years after my father passed. For 2 years, I was stuck. I was still engaging in the same old eating habits, not moving consistently or enough, living in a fog of overwhelming sadness, shame, and resignation with zero motivation, wearing what I now call a heavy coat of grief, one that felt permanent. After 2 years in the after, living in that status quo, I honestly believed that version of myself was who I would be forever. But then something happened. Something I never would have seen coming in a million years. No, it wasn't Ozempic or any of those other GLP-1 medications. It wasn't a crash diet, liposuction, or a doctor's order. It was a pilot light that reignited in my soul. This week, I want to talk about how joy became the catalyst for my physical reclamation and how it could become the catalyst for all of us living in the after of caregiving. For 2 years after my dad died, the weight stayed. I was in that cycle of starting the morning with the best of intentions, that this would be the day I chose healthier foods, the day I would finally go to the gym, the day I would take my dogs on a much longer walk. But by the evening, I would watch those intentions plummet into giving up. The onslaught of sadness and shame would take over, and I'd find myself back in that endless circle I couldn't seem to break free from. We often think weight loss is about discipline, and in some regards, that is true. But when you've been a long-term caregiver, your discipline is exhausted. You've used it all up on everyone else. What I didn't need was more should-be doings. Should be eating this, should be eating that, should be moving here, should be moving there. What I needed was a reason to come back to life, a shift to make myself my number one priority. So what was the shift for me? I touched on this way back in episode 4, and over the years, I have often thought, wow, it was the most unlikely of things. The shift started happening when I began planning a highly covert surprise ordination party for a local pastor. Not just another Catholic priest, but instead one with a deep caregiver's heart who most certainly deserved a little appreciation. We caregivers can always spot another caregiver, can't we? They come in all packages: family caregivers, healthcare workers, clergy. Perhaps not in the same exact role, but the empathy, the kindness, And the sacrifice for someone else is like our second nature. It resonates out of our pores. I always seem to navigate to other caregivers. Do you find the same? Anyway, it was a big secret. It required an extraordinary amount of planning, coordination, and for the first time in years, momentum and execution. Suddenly, I was jolted out of my grieving head and heart. I was focusing on someone else's milestone, someone else's joy, appreciating another caregiver. I was moving, I was organizing, I was excited, and I was happy. The planning took a few months, and during that time, I lost 10 pounds. I remember laughing and thinking it was the guilt for lying to a priest, not just once, but on several occasions to get him to the party, and that the guilt made me lose my appetite. But it was a spark. That party planning relit a pilot light in me that had been extinguished for years. I proved to myself that I could still feel something other than lost, defeated, and depressed. It pulled me out of the sadness and gave me a taste of what life could look like if I was an active participant in it again. In one word, joy. Joy was the spark. It gave me the energy to finally say, okay, now I'm ready to take care of Thérèse. Once that party was over, the momentum didn't stop. It honestly felt like a high-speed train with no brakes. I took that spark of joy and ran with it. Like an Olympic runner carrying the torch, I let it travel. Not just through one moment, but through my entire life. And I applied it directly to my health. I began with nutrition. Real food, real fuel, high protein, chicken, cottage cheese, vegetables. The foods I had always loved, but didn't have the energy or motivation to prepare for myself during caregiving and grief. And then I started moving. Walking became the key. Simple, accessible, gentle but powerful. But after several years of muscle atrophy, which science tells us is a natural byproduct of chronic stress and the sitting, watching, and waiting of caregiving, and now being a woman in my 50s, I realized I needed to embark on a lifelong strength training journey. Biology is very clear on this. After age 30, we can lose 3 to 8% of our muscle mass per decade, a process called sarcopenia. For a caregiver who hasn't been able to prioritize movement, that loss can feel even more profound. Strength training isn't just about toning. It's about metabolic health, bone density, and reclaiming functional strength. So I became a faithful regular at Planet Fitness. I still am. And I'll be honest with you, at $10 a month, there is no excuse for anyone. Every piece of equipment you need to get strong is there. You don't need a fancy boutique gym, expensive trainers, or fashionable workout wear. What you need is the willingness to show up for yourself in a space where you can just be. Strength training became my moving meditation. Every weight I lifted felt like I was physically pushing back against the heaviness of the last few years, reclaiming my body and my soul, one rep at a time. And in a nutshell, that was the journey to my 50-pound weight loss. and the muscle definition that I didn't even know was possible. Because I found a spark of joy that reminded me I was worth the effort. If you're sitting there today, 2 years out, 5 years out, or 2 weeks out, and you feel stuck, stop looking at the scale or your reflection in the mirror for a second. Look for the joy. What can you do for someone else? What secret project can you start? What pilot light can you light? Because once that fire is lit, the how becomes easy. The gym becomes a sanctuary, not a chore. The water tastes better. The sleep feels deeper. We're heading into February next week, our month of self-love. And I want you to remember that self-love isn't just a feeling. It's an action. It's choosing to be your own covert mission. Your body carried you through the hardest chapter of your life. Now it's time to give it the joy it's been starving for. Check out the February self-love calendar at newyorkgirlagain.com. Maybe your day number 1 is just finding your local Planet Fitness and walking through the door. I'm Thérèse, and this is New York Girl Again, The After. I'll see you next week as we begin to reclaim our hearts together. Until then, find your spark. It's still in there. I promise.